Hey y'all, and welcome back to My Creative Life with Kelssweetie, where we make art, we craft, and we read books and essentially do whatever our creative hearts desire. Today we are talking about my October wrap-up. October actually was a pretty good reading month for me, surprisingly enough, after coming out some slums. So I'm excited to talk a bit about what I've been reading and how it all went. So let's get into it. I'm recording this on my phone because I don't have my camera with me, and I started reading Rouge, and I am trying to do this thing now where I'm like vlogging as I'm reading. So I'm probably, I want to say 5% into the book, and it is definitely better than Bunny. I feel like I've stated before that Mona Awad's Bunny, while it was great in the last 40%, I just want the entire book to be what that 40% was. Instead, it was just tons of world building. So I don't know if she heard our cries about that, but it gets straight to it. Like, she's building the world, but she's not taking forever to get straight into the creepiness, straight into the cultiness of the beauty industry. There's already some weird things going on, and I'm listening to the audiobook. I recommend, if you can get the audiobook, read the audiobook, because these French accents for some reason make it even creepier. I'm liking it so far. I'm only 5% in. Like I said before, this is a buddy read with Roxanne from Bye Bun, and I'm getting a little bit of a head start because I know I'm gonna need a head start because she moves when it comes to reading. So this is my little tiny head start. But so far it's good. I'm excited to see where it goes from here. It's about like a 12-hour book from like the speed I'm reading, and I have about 11 hours left of it, 11 and a half hours. It's good so far. I'm glad that we didn't just world build for like ever. Okay, there's a lot of people walking around here. I'm in a Target parking lot. So last time I checked in with y'all, I was in my car and I was reading Rouge. And it was more of a vlog. I'm back in my corner because I just finished wrapping up my one-sentence review Goodreads goal. I'm still working on the title, as you can see. But I just finished wrapping that up, and I thought that I would get on camera real quick because I stopped reading Rouge because I was getting too far in it. And I had started as a head start just so that I didn't get left behind. And so I stopped. I was like, I'm gonna wait until she says, hey, I started the book, and then I'll pick back up. She has started the book. I need to check back in with her to see how far she is in the book so that I can pick back up and we can talk about it and we can really buddy read it. But in the meantime, it has been, it hasn't even really been a week. I think that was like on Monday, and today is Saturday. So in that short amount of time, I have nearly finished the loop. Oh my gosh. And I know I said I would vlog, but I was devouring this book, and there was no way that I just wasn't finding any time to go as we go talk about it. And I have around 25%, and I need to finish it so that I can put all in on Rouge and read that. So with that being said, this is my late progress update on the loop, which you all didn't even know that I had started. This book's amazing. It is also extremely digestible. It is, again, only 303 pages. The audiobook is like 9 hours, and I don't read my audiobooks super fast, in my opinion. I read at most 1.5. Usually I'm sitting, and that's if like my time's running out or I'm bored by a book. Usually I'm sitting at like 1.2, like 1.25 maybe. And even with this one, I think I was at like 1.15 or something percent, like barely up from like its normal pacing. I was just devouring this book. There are no like parts of it that are just in it. just to be in it. And I love that. You know me, I don't want you to get flowery with your words. I don't need 5 pages about, how the sun looked that day when something happened. Like, I don't need that. Just tell me the sun was up, and then let's move on. I'd have too short of attention span. I know that there's beauty in it. There's a reason why there's a ton of Toni Morrisons still sitting on this shelf, and they have yet to be read, or they were DNF'd or put down for later. Tar Baby being one of them. I cannot do the flowery language. I don't like it. I am here for the story, not the art. And I know as an artist, that's horrible for me to say, but it's true. And this book does not do that. You start the book as... It was interesting because I didn't expect the beginning to be like what it was, and that was starting the book like it was this conspiracy theory podcast. And that piqued my interest. I was like, oh, what is this about? There's a conspiracy? And then it's all from the point of view of Lucy, who it has just literally is just now graduating high school. But on the last day of school, a kid loses it, takes out his teacher, aggressively beats him to death. And then the SWAT team just comes in and ends it. It's all from her point of view of everything that has happened from that day onward. Pandemonium breaks loose within that week. Between then and when everything pops off. As I've talked about before, I love a side of politics with my horror and thrillers. Always. And Lucy is Peruvian and is one of the few brown kids in this small town, this suburb, and they talk about that experience in a very authentic way. It's not like spoken about in a way that's very academic. It's spoken about and from a very realistic, I think, point of view of a high schooler dealing with that and not having the words to talk about how to deal with that. Especially as her being Peruvian and taken from her home country because of the abusive household she grew up in and was adopted by well-meaning white parents. And even that conversation of her feeling displaced, although feeling like she's being cared for. Yeah, The Loop. So good. So good so far. I'm interested to see how this ends. I don't see Lucy getting out of this. If she did get out of it, I honestly don't know how she would, and I don't know where she would be after everything that's happened. And I feel like the pacing is great. I feel like this is a movie. I was explaining what I had read to my partner, and he is not one for a horror movie, but he does like a good story. And he was like, this is thrilling. This feels like a movie. Yes, where is the movie rights for Loop? Somebody get them on the phone to get this a movie, because I could see this doing really well. A24 could blow this out the park. I'm enjoying it so far. I literally have 25% to go. I'm going to try and knock it out. I don't think it's going to happen tonight, but I do think that I am going to be able to knock it out by tomorrow. And I don't know. It's been a great ride. I don't know how the ending is going to be, and I don't want a trick ending, if that makes sense. I don't want her to like survive all of this like they cheated us. Yeah, and all of a sudden, like the police showed up. And she got out. Like, what? Out of nowhere? After all this time? So if it ends like that, I'll probably be really disappointed, and I'll knock off a point. I'll knock off a star for a bad ending, as we know I am known to do. But so far it's a 5-star. I hope I don't jinx it saying that, but so far it's a 5-star. It's really good. Hey, also checking back in, I finished The Loop, and I'm thinking it's a 4.5 star. I want to give it 5, but after I was explaining to my partner how it ended, because he was really kind of invested in the story, I realized it's more of a 4.5. It gets a half a point taken off because really the logistics and like the actual explanation for how they ended up beating this hive mind is a little hazy. I think if you are definitely into conspiracy theories and are really into that stuff and realize how much power and how much technology the government has that's not even open to the public, but if you do a little research, you can realize, I think you'll really like appreciate this type of horror story because it's a lot of biotechnology, which I appreciate. I don't think that I've seen enough recent horror that has to do like apocalyptic horror that has to do with actual biotech, not just like biological, like Last of Us type of stuff, but taking that idea and connecting it with the actual technology of satellites and hive mind and code and this, that, and the other. I think that made it even scarier in my opinion because it kind of felt like it was everywhere all at once, and not just in a way of like something airborne, but something that is like further than that. I appreciated it. I think that, you know, Lucy, the main character, whose point of view we get everything from, she felt really authentic. And I mean that in the sense of like, usually with high school girls who are written especially by men, they're kind of like, okay, this person's annoying, like, you know, the whole world's ending, why are you thinking of, you know, whether or not like this guy likes you or whatever. It was very much this fight or flight response that felt authentic. I don't know if that makes sense, but I appreciate that. I had a fun time during all the writing. It had some like parts that felt like The Matrix. It had some parts that felt like The Last of Us. It had some parts that felt like Zombieland type of things, or 28 Days Later. And it was fun. It was a fun read. I mean, all in all, I think the half point was just taken off because going back to like try and explain to somebody how it all ended up seemed a little bit hard, and I was like, so they could have maybe like explained that a little clearer or better. But I also realized that there's not really that much research out there for you to clearly explain how some of those things work, so I'm kind of giving them that as well. That's why I'm not taking a full point off. The other thing as well is the ending. I was going to take a whole point off, so last time I checked in with y'all, I was concerned with the ending and whether or not it was going to be like something I could accept. And I feel like if it was too hopeful an ending, I would have been upset and I would have knocked off a full point. Because in apocalyptic stories, I feel like if they're super hopeful and like the main character is like, yeah, and this Hail Mary happened and we all survived, I always just feel like that's not realistic. And it's not me like trying to be like negative. It's just like when the whole world is ground zero, or like, you know, a town, or like your world is ground zero and it's basically flat and dead earth, the idea of you getting out of it or something being hopeful or something along those lines kind of just feels like a cop-out. I didn't get that with this one at all. So I will say that I appreciated how the book ended because I felt like there really was no other way to end the book except in this way. I'm not going to give away how it ends. 4.5 stars. And if I wasn't doing halves, I would still give it 5, in all honesty. That half is really just me being nitpicky on that. I mean, I think that I put it in my Goodreads as 5 because at some point you just have to be like, no, this was a good book. It was a good read. I had fun. I had fun reading it. I'm starting Rouge now, back up with Rouge now, because Roxanne has caught up in where she is, and now I have to kind of catch up where she is. But I have a lot of DIYs to work on today, and a lot of that's just voiceover. So I'm just gonna be like working through listening to Rouge. I'm excited to get back into it, especially coming off of this book, because it was really atmospheric in a good way. Like I said before, I feel like Bunny had me in the last half because the first half was just building out the background and you were just like, okay, I get it. Like, when is it, like, stuff gonna hit the fan? And then when it does, it's like, great, fantastic. This has been a wonderful read. Mona Awad learned from her last book and just got right into it from the beginning, which I appreciated. So I'm excited to see where this goes, and I'll check back in. Hey, y'all. So I'm looking a little in my car again. I feel like a majority of these vlogs are going to be in my car because that is where I mainly listen to my audiobooks, are when I'm driving in the car. So I don't know, maybe I'll make it a thing, but I have some update, and I also have like some feedback right now that I just can't wait until I'm back home and like my space or whatever to actually like talk about. One, I finished Rouge. It was great. One, that was probably my first buddy read that actually worked. I have tried many times in the past to buddy read with people who want to start reading and go, hey, just pick out a book. I trust your, opinion because you read a lot. And then they end up dropping the book, or we end up just not matching up. And it was great to read this book with Roxanne because she gets where my mind is. It was great. For me, it was 4 stars. I think that if you are a mother, you yourself will love that book. You'll know, like, further the complex relationship of a mother-daughter relationship because you've been both. For me, as only being a daughter, I can only grasp it from that angle, although there is a monologue from a jellyfish. It's probably the most spot-on conversation around the complexity of like a mother-daughter relationship and the idea of protection and wanting, you know, your daughter to be better, but then also that, you know, offspring taking so much of your personality and who you are in some ways because of you raising them, and then being kind of like this inherent envy or jealousy that sometimes comes from that. And excuse me if I'm looking into my rear view. I am in a parking lot and I am still getting used to this whole people are around you and you're filming thing. Yeah, it was really great. It was great. And you really kind of, you fall and you see the build into the insanity and everything. Now, the reason why I feel like I can't give it a full, and you know, we'll talk about this more in my overall wrap up, but I can't give it a full 5 stars, really is because I was left with too many questions in regard to the male characters in the book. One, what is their purpose? Are they metaphors? I don't think that I got it from reading the book, what exactly they represented. So, because there's such an emphasis on the male, like, counterparts in her life. So I'm like sitting in there asking questions of, okay, who are they and what are they metaphors for? And you don't really, for me, I didn't really get that answer. I didn't do as good of a job on really giving updates throughout reading that book because I feel like I was reading it in huge chunks as I was working through crafts or planning the Halloween party or whatever. And I was already kind of like giving my feedback to Roxanne in real time. So by the time I'm like, oh, I should probably get on camera and talk about it, it was kind of over. So yeah, finish Rouge. So now we are two books down into October. We're essentially halfway into the month. Now I'm reading The Chain, which I had started reading in an effort to kind of slow down reading Rouge so that Roxanne could catch up because she was also doing a lot of things that was holding her back from reading and I didn't want to go too far. So I started reading The Chain. I'm not really enjoying myself reading this book. The characters suck. There's no character development. This chain that's going on, I feel like, is only attacking suburban white neighborhoods, suburban white upper middle class families of some sort. And that's very boring to me. It's reading like a Lifetime movie. And in a bad way. You're not a fan. Personally, I'm not a fan or interested in the mother. I'm not a fan or interested in the uncle who's named Pete. Uncle Pete. Not a fan of him either. The daughter is annoying and she's like 12, nearly 13 years old and has no sort of self-awareness whatsoever. I think the idea of The Chain, which is this like essentially like anonymous group that for some reason is causing this havoc of like ransom and like death and murder and all these other things and using like surveillance as a mechanism of a weapon. I think in theory, like something like that is interesting to read about, but interesting when it's about many different walks of life. Essentially, a lot of these families end up targeting white, rich families because they know that they're going to be able to pay the ransom and they don't want the chain or whatever to be broken, or else if it is, it falls back. The blowback is on you, which can mean that your like son or daughter, whomever was, and that's another thing, they never specify that who you need to kidnap as a ransom needs to be a child, but it seems that all these family members who are parents are like, yeah, I'm gonna go steal another child because of the fact of like the ease of stealing a child. That's unsettling. A lot of these parents kind of seem like just crappy parents, to be honest. Instead of like going in guns blazing or something. I feel like if I was at that age and I was stolen from my parents know people who would be like, yo, this happened. We need to figure out who these people are. Come in guns blazing. I feel like that's also the reason, like, I feel like this couldn't, well, one, this happens to people of color all the time, like these atrocities and not being able to go to the police because of a lack of trust between both and because of the history of like the police system with people of color and issues of kidnapping and that's like the biggest reason I feel like that there, like, this entire book is just full of white people getting their people stolen. And it's not like that's laughable, like in the sense of what the situation is, but it's laughable when you're writing a book about it. And that's why it reads like a Lifetime movie, because it reads like an issue that's only an issue in an isolated situation in a very, this has never happened before type of way. Although the main character has gone through hell and back, like she's had cancer, she's going through a divorce currently. So you're kind of sitting there and you're like, so why are you having her going through so much hell? Is that to make her more relatable? It doesn't feel like it's like to make her a very dynamic character. It makes it feel like, oh, we just want it so that we didn't just have a bunch of, you know, white suburban families who were well off all of a sudden having this atrocity happen in their life, and it's the only one that's ever happened to them, you know? And now there's been this romantic situation. I hate when books just throw a romantic whatever into a book between the two main characters for no reason other than maybe they got bored. I don't know. It's recently done that. Not a fan of that. Not a fan of the Uncle Pete person, and not just because he's not necessarily likable as a person. I am always saying, you don't have to have likable characters, just interesting ones. And I don't even feel like he's interesting. The whole, I'm a veteran, so therefore I'm a user because of the atrocities that I've seen and the possibility. I don't even think they talk about him actually being like strung out because of like injuries he sustained during the war or whatever. So it's just kind of, I feel like that's it's a complex trope that gets thrown around a lot. And it also didn't feel like this is a character building situation. It's like giving the mom cancer. It's like, okay, and how does this build into the character and why they're making the decisions they're making? Because it doesn't. Like, don't, give some hardship to a character just because you think it makes them edgy. Give it to them to like make it seem like, oh, this is the reason why this person's making the decisions they're making. I'm not getting that at all. So I'm a little over half. I think I'm 60% into the book. And at this point, I think I just want to know how it ends. Per usual, if I'm not having a good time reading a book, more times than not, I'll finish it just so I know how it ends. It's just not that great of a book. I personally, like right now, even if it ends like, whoa, didn't see that coming, I still think I wouldn't recommend it, which is disappointing because I've heard many people like big up this book, like, oh, this is really great and it's interesting. And the only thing that's thrilling about it is just sitting here and like in moments where big decisions have to happen, like killing a child. That's another thing. A lot of the writing is repetitive. Like the writer keeps on just insinuating killing a child is just the worst thing that you could possibly do. But it's not what they're saying, it's how they're saying it, because they keep on repeating it in the same word. Like it'll be like maybe 2-3 chapters down and they'll repeat it in the exact same words that they repeated 2-3 chapters ahead. It's like, fine, that's the topic of this book, but we have to learn how to say it differently. Yeah, I just kind of am bored by it, and I didn't want to wait to get home to maybe talk about it because I'm so upset about it, to the point where I've been avoiding even picking it back up, even though today would have been a great day for me to just kind of, because I was on my own, to just kind of listen to it and just finish it. At this point, I kind of just want to knock it out and then finish and then start Dead 11. I know if I start Dead 11 and I don't finish this book, I'm not sure if I'm going to finish this book. It's a very big possibility because there won't be anything to really push me to like finish the book. Okay. Bye, y'all. So I started out the month with The Loop, and honestly, 5-star book. So good. I really personally think that book was, it has like a psychological thriller, it's a horror novel, apocalyptic, it has to do with conspiracy theories, it's all from the point of view of a woman of color, it talks about class, it talks about racism. It honestly was so good. I don't really want to give too much away, but it has to do with a town in Washington, a small town in Washington, where essentially everyone in the town has a job at this conglomerate facility that definitely does experiments, and it turns out that like the experiments that they're doing are on the kids who live in this town. A few of them have been experimented on, and you find out later on that one of the kids might have been a sociopath. I don't want to give too much more other than that, but it does deal with concepts of biotech weaponry. It has like alien otherworldly elements. I mean, honestly, this book read like a high-pack action thriller movie. I blew through it. Like, I picked it up thinking, oh, I've got a little bit of time, and I absolutely blew through it in like 4 or 5 days. I would have blew through it even faster if I could have just read it all the way through. It was so good. I think if you're really into a high pace book, this one's for you for certain. If you want something that builds up a story before everything goes haywire a little bit more, this is not for you. There is no real prequel to like before everything starts going haywire. It really is just, it goes haywire. You have to assume that everything was normal before then, or somewhat normal. And you're finding things out at the same time as the main character is. So, who's a high schooler. So, I think it was such a good book. I really would love for A24 or somebody to pick this up as a movie, because I just think it read so good and so fast. You could see everything that was happening. It didn't take too long for build up. I mean, I feel like one problem I keep on having with horror or thrillers, I get atmospheric books. Not against them. Some of my most favorite books that I've read have been very like, we've set the scene. Later on this month, I read an extremely atmospheric book, which we'll talk about in a bit. But I think that sometimes, especially horror and thriller, in order to prove itself as like literary, like it's not just, you know, candy, sometimes some authors have a tendency to over-explain scenes or use a lot of, you know, build up to try and get you scared, when it's like, no, just describe to me what's happening. I could be scared enough. Yeah, I absolutely love The Loop. I recommend it to anyone who's asking me for a good high thriller recommendation, and it was a great way to start my October on a thrilling, like I said, apocalyptic, just conspiracy theorist note. Like, it was just good on so many levels. Now, I will say, if you are about the details of how the experiments kind of come to be and the real science of it, I think there are portions of it that aren't very easily explainable, but I also think that's because there are only bits and pieces of that sort of science that you can readily find as like a layman person. That's my excuse I'm giving to the science breakdown. I'm sure there's somebody out there who is far smarter than me who will read this book, and when you finally get described like what is actually happening to all the people and the kids in this town, you're gonna go, that doesn't make any sense. And for me, I could tell a little bit that I was a little bit like, I don't know if that fully makes sense, but I'm still here for the vibes. The vibes are immaculate, so we're gonna keep going. I don't think enough people are talking about this book for some reason. I don't remember anyone even talking about it when it came out. So read The Loop. The Loop was great. Great way to start this month. The second book I got into this month was Rouge. I say it like that every single time I announce it. Rouge, because I feel like that's how you have to say the title. It is the newest novel by Mona Awad. I did not expect to like Rouge as much as I did. Bunny by Mona Awad was the ending. While I love the ending, the first 40% lost me to the point where I DNF'd it. I DNF'd it for maybe 2-3 months, and then I picked it back up. Turns out that I dropped the book when it started to really catch up. The first 40% of the book was very, let's set the scene, let's overset the scene and everything, to the point where you sometimes kind of got lost where you were. I don't know if Mona Awad heard that from a couple of people who read Bunny and then went back to the drawing board and said, say less, because in Rouge, there is no, 40% of just setting scene and no plot. I think that she finally found that balance between setting a very like atmospheric scene to the point where you feel like you're in the room, like you're actually experiencing these things, as well as sitting there and knowing what's going on, not getting so lost in the atmosphere and the setting that you have no idea where the plot is anymore. I think she did such a great job. So without sharing too much, it is about a mother-daughter relationship in relation to a beauty cult. That mother-daughter relationship is strained for numerous reasons, as well as the many, many reasons that mother-daughter relationships are tricky to navigate, especially as two femme women. This one deals with, which was surprising to me, ideas of European beauty standards and being raised as a mixed child, not knowing her background from the parent who is not white. She was raised by her mother who was, and truly meaning the best, did not know how to instill in her the pride of her ethnicity or her beauty, especially when, you know, you wake up and you're seeing your mother do the opposite of wanting those things that are inherently yours, or growing up in a school or community that did not recognize the beauty in that, and not just being able to be there the way that is necessary regardless of being well-meaning. And I think that that's a very complicated situation, but a very necessary conversation to have. Culture to culture, where that beauty standard shifts. So that, I think that was one thing I wasn't expecting. I was definitely expecting beauty cult realness, but I don't think I was expecting for the political implications of it to really hit as well as they personally did for me. Now, this book is it is a weird ride. I will not lie to you, but in a way that makes you feel like you're slipping into insanity with her. Because she most definitely slips into insanity, true craziness. There are moments where you're just picturing this in a movie setting and you're like, oh, you're lost. This is bad. I gave this book 4 stars. I gave it 4 stars because personally, I think there were too many unanswered questions about the men in this book. There are 3 main men in this book that I feel like were footnotes in her story, but played out like they were important portions of it. Like they were like messengers of like different parts of them. And there's never a lot of clarity on who they are as people. It's like this reverse, like, oh, I can't think of like the test, Belcher test, where it's like, oh, if you can't answer these, and it's not a feminist like piece of literature and stuff. I think it was like the reverse of that, because like these 3 men, it was like, where do they operate outside of her? Because they kind of felt like just these characters to push the plot forward, rather than like these characters who were there for the plot. I don't know if that makes sense or anything, but I just there were too many questions regarding them, and there's too many questions regarding, and if you've read the book, you know who I'm talking about when I say this, Tom Cruise. There were too many questions left. Who was he? What was his purpose? What was he really? That was never answered in my opinion, and that was too big of a gap for me to like be okay with it. If you have not read the book, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But go back to this, like, after you've read the book, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I think that there are a lot of references to the Tom Cruise movie Vanilla Sky, which is why I think Tom Cruise is mentioned in the book. I have told everybody this theory who will listen to me. Mona Awad didn't just pick Tom Cruise's name out of a hat. It is a reference to Vanilla Sky, the beauty, political conversations, and the conversation of like other worlds and layers of other universes and being ugly and how to deal with these things and all of that. I personally think that's why Tom Cruise is mentioned in the book. I want somebody to prove this right. I want Mona Awad to get out there and be like, yes, this is why Tom Cruise is in the book. It is because of the reference to Vanilla Sky and the themes that are in the movie. This is the hill I've died on regarding this. Out of context, another great line I think that describes the book very well is the most beautiful monologue from a jellyfish I've ever heard. And again, until you read the book, you won't understand what that means. But it truly was, it just hit the nail on the head on the conversation of just mother-daughter relationships and how tricky they are and how beautiful they are when they work and how destructive they are when they don't. So yeah, Rouge was such a good read. Again, it was a 5-star in like the experience, but I just have to take off a 4-star because I just felt like these characters who were so important ended up being footnotes. The third book that I read this month was a total letdown, and that was The Chain. I was excited to read this book because of the premise of this idea that as a parent, your child is going to be taken, and in order to get your child back, you have to pay a ransom as well as steal another child in order to get your child back. And you have to make sure that that person that you've now stolen from also goes out and steal a child before you can get your child back. Like this whole insidious chain that is created by some unknown power, like this Big Brother anonymous type entity. I thought that was very interesting. I was like, what does that mean? Is it again, a conspiracy theory, tech thriller type thing is what I was expecting. That's not all what I got. I got a Lifetime movie in the worst way possible. It just wasn't enjoyable. I scoffed at the main character's dialogue all the time. I scoffed at the uncle. It has to do with a mother whose daughter has just been stolen and her experience of being in the chain and her experience while experiencing that chain with her ex-brother-in-law, who she falls in love with. I just feel like with a storyline that is that good, or a plot line that seems that good, the fact of it getting deduced down to basically something that feels like it should have been on Lifetime and not even one of the good Lifetime movies, I was just really disappointed. And it's split up into 2 parts. In the second part, you get to learn more about the chain, which I didn't want. I think finding out about the chain and humanizing those who were behind the chain really ruined it for me, and also made for them to also kind of be caricatures of themselves. I didn't appreciate that. I think the ending of it was hokey. There was suspension of belief like nearly 3 times in the book. You had to basically just believe that this thing, you'll know if you read, but like this thing could possibly happen 3 times in a row to save people's lives. It just didn't make any sense. I personally just didn't think it was good writing because there were also a couple of times where sentences were repeated, conversations felt repeated. There was no real like build-up of the characters, so you didn't really care about them too much, or they just didn't make sense. Yeah, I didn't like The Chain. I think I ended up giving it 2 stars. I only give a 1 star really if I feel like insulted by a book or something. My intelligence kind of felt insulted, but other than that, I just chalked it up to it just didn't feel like good writing. And I think I was even more upset because I was really excited. A lot of people kept saying this was a great book, or they had a great time reading this book, like people who read horror and thriller, who I trust the reviews. And I don't see it. I don't see how it was any good. So yeah, that was pretty bad to read after reading 2 books that really felt great, all things considered. So Chain, I personally don't waste your time. The last book that I read this month was Dead 11, which I feel like so many people are obsessed and talking about right now, and mainly it's because of this cover. This is such a great cover. This cover drew me in. I don't think I would have read this book, especially considering this is the first novel from this author, from Jimmy Giuliano. I don't think that I would have read this book if it hadn't had that great of a cover, and it pulled me in. It's 440 some odd pages. It does not need to be that long, and I think it actually ruins the book how long it is. I think Giuliano really could have cut his darlings, both literally and figuratively. I mean that meaning this book read so much scarier when he really leaned into building the setting and atmosphere. So the same thing that I now love Mona Awad for, but at first was a detriment, I feel like Jimmy Giuliano could learn from. Essentially, there's this island, Clifford Island. They are, for some reason, caught in this loop of 1994, this singular day. Everybody on the island does the exact same thing every single day. It kind of feels like this weird cult. A mom, Willow, ends up trying to figure out what connection her son has to this island, her son who she's lost. Willow goes missing and her brother goes looking for her. Now, one thing I did love about this book was that it was very found footagey, which, considering this book is trying to be very nostalgic in its setting, I thought was interesting, especially for it to be caught in like around 1993 or so, because I feel like that was a reference to the Blair Witch Project and the start of movies using found footage as pieces of actual like content and everything that was freaking people out. I think that was interesting, especially like listening to the audiobook. They had a full cast and I thought that was great. I really didn't start getting scared or creeped out until we really started talking about the entity that's like living on the island, and just the ending in particular. Like, I don't know if he started to get his stride, but the ending really gave it an extra star, because reading it, I was like, this is a 3. I'm moving through this slowly, and this is a 3. I'm a little bit bored. It's a 3. It's not necessarily horrible, but it's just not what I thought it would be. The ending earned it a 4. The ending was that good. I just think that if he would have shortened down the book and really set the scene early on with some of these dead things and these monsters that were in this book, I think it would have been an even better read. I'm excited to see what Jimmy Giuliano comes up with in his second novel. I think that this is just because this is his first novel. He might be just trying to like work out his writing style and everything. Again, great ending. I cannot say enough that it was worth it in the end to get to that ending, because I really do feel like I was creeped out, and the metaphors were really strong in this one by the end, and it was very cult thrillery, The Village type of thing here. I just wish I would have felt that way throughout the entire book, instead of having these repetitive situations that kind of were beating a dead horse. I gave it a 3.5 officially. I think on Goodreads I gave it around a 4. Rounded it up because you can't do half. Yeah, I think that ending was great. Just needed that throughout the entire book. So yeah, that's it. That was all of the books that I read in October. Although it was only 4, I'm excited that I actually made it through those 4, because those were the 4 for my TBR. So I did get through my entire TBR, and all things considered, they were really good books that I read. The only thing I was disappointed by was the chain, but other than that, I'm happy with everything else I read. Even Dead 11, while it might have had a slow beginning to it, the ending was really great. It was a good month. October is over, but that does not mean that spooky season is over as far as my reading is concerned. You know, I talked about this in my 1-sentence review video when I passed my 39 books that I had read last year, that while I did go out of my comfort zone this year, I found out quite a bit. It wasn't a great reading year for me, looking back at my reviews and the things that were memorable. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I love my horror sci-fi thriller. So I'm excited going into November, because I have some book content that I'm excited to do in between some of the Christmas content that we will be doing in preparation for the most wonderful time of the year. But I do have a lot of sci-fi and thriller and horror to read, and I'm excited because I've kind of already started reading, and it's been good so far. I'm excited to see where next month goes. I have a good amount of books on my TBR, but I feel like some of them are shorter, and with the holidays coming up and everything and travel, I feel like I can probably breeze through some of these. We will see. I think the fact that I kept my expectations of like 4 books, which is usually how many books I usually read every month, is 4 to 5 books. I think I'm being a little ambitious for next month to knock out more than that, but I'm excited because it's going to be a good amount of horror and thrillers. So let's hope that I'm right with that. So if you're looking for more bookish content and everything, subscribe down below, because I definitely will be giving you that this November, as well as any Christmas crafts and art. I am coming off of Inktober, so I'm a little shaky as far as illustrating right now. I've got to get my mind back into it, because it definitely was a lot. But I do expect to be doing a lot more out of my comfort zone as far as art is concerned. I'm excited for that. So like I said, subscribe down below, and like if you did hear about any books that you really loved. I would love to hear if anybody read Rouge this last month. It just came out, so I'd be excited to hear how you guys liked it. And if you've read The Loop, again, I really think people need to be reading more of The Loop. I'm not hearing enough about it, and I really think it was a great book. Let me know down below, though, if you read it and you thought that it was as good as I thought it was. And if you're one of those people who absolutely love the chain, I would love to hear why you liked it, because I'm lost on how anybody likes it. All right, guys. Well, that'll be it for today. Till the next one. Bye.